From the other end of the phone, I heard a cool voice. I'm at a small restaurant right now. Do you remember this place? You? I cut off Emily's voice, saying, I remember. You have a good memory. I thought you might be busy today. I interrupted her again. I'm free. Can I come over now? A chuckling sound came from the other end of the phone. It's so frustrating not to be able to see her face. The smile of the girl I used to love is there on the other side of the phone. I'll be waiting. The moment I hung up, I started running. My name is Steve. I'm turning 37 this year. I have recently been assigned to a new department, and am being introduced to everyone at the morning meeting. It's somewhat embarrassing to hear the department head explain things about me. But I can't just stand around. I need to perform beyond what was introduced and contribute to the department. With that determination, I look at everyone's faces to regain my focus. As the morning meeting ends, and everyone is about to return to their desks, that's when it happened. Sorry I'm late, said a young man as he slid into the department. The department head was scolding him for being late. It's not late. Just made it. I'll take the scolding later. I'm really busy right now, he said, opening his laptop. Man, I was drinking with Mr. Johnson, president of our client company yesterday, and it went on late. He invited me to his house. He said if I caught the 7:30 train, I'd make it, and I did just that, but it was a close call. Tough night, he rattled on, unasked. The department started buzzing. Yes, it just happened, he responded lightly to a colleague's question if he had stayed over at the house of the president of our client. Overnight stay at the house of the president of our client. It seems he's good at getting into people's good graces. Even I, meeting him for the first time, found myself disarmed. The department head was visibly troubled, but, ignoring his twitching eyebrows, the man gestured for him to wait. No, I'm really busy right now. There's a meeting with Company S, and I've got a lot of stuff today. Hearing about Company S made me perk up. A lot of stuff? I couldn't help but ask, and the man sighed while looking at his laptop. Yeah. The supervisor from the client said the materials we brought last time weren't enough. So I said I'd bring all the materials. Steve's been pushing me to wrap things up with Company S by today. The young guy glanced at the department head while speaking. He just nodded silently with a stern face. The young guy sighed. I've explained everything thoroughly already. I wonder what's missing. To his muttering, I asked, can I accompany you on this negotiation? At my words, the man looked up suddenly. Eh? Despite his furrowed brows, I pressed on. You said there's a lot of stuff, right? I'll help you carry it. My offer seemed like a godsend, as his face lit up. Really? That would be a big help, he said, then looked back down at his laptop. I'll call you when we're leaving. Thanks a lot. Without looking at me again, he immersed himself back into his computer. The department head gave me a questioning look, as if to say, are you sure about this? I nodded with a smile. 30 minutes later. Let's go. Called by the young guy, I rushed over to him. Oh, by the way, I'm Mark. Have we met before? Actually, I'm the top salesman. Finally, I learned his name. I introduced myself with a wry smile. I'm Steve. Nice to meet you. Mark nodded and handed me a bag full of files, which I took. All right, let's go. With a brisk step, Mark hurried across the floor. I managed to keep up with him. Arriving at Company S, Mark checked us in, and we were directed to a meeting room. Seeing me looking around curiously, Mark laughed. Don't look around so much. Are you okay? Well, it's a big company. Even the meeting room is unnecessarily luxurious. It was unclear if Mark was trying to ease my nerves or just making small talk, but he spoke with a friendly smile. However, it's strange. Doesn't he wonder about me, someone he just met today? Though we had briefly introduced ourselves once, it felt awkward to say anything more. As I was thinking about this, the door to the meeting room opened, and a man entered. This man, Carl, seemed familiar with Mark, and they started chatting amiably right away. Mark, I'm counting on you today. I want to recommend you to my boss with confidence. So please make sure I have enough information to give a boost. Carl said, extending his hand for a shake. Mark gestured towards the bag I was holding and reassured, no worries. Look, I brought a ton of materials. That was when Carl finally noticed me. Who's this? As I was about to introduce myself, Mark cut in, he's just helping me carry stuff today. We have so many files. Oh, really? Carl said. I nodded and greeted him. Though I missed the chance to introduce myself properly, I continued to observe the negotiations. Faced with a mountain of files, Carl looked troubled. Mark, don't you have a summary of this? Mark frowned. But last time, you said to bring all the materials, he replied. Carl groaned. But still, no one's going to look through all these files. If we present this, I'll get chewed out. You know my boss is called the Queen of Ice. You know? Reacting to Carl's words, I asked. The Queen of Ice? As I repeated the term, Carl made a face as if he'd slipped up. Please don't mention it. She's very capable but strict with herself and others. They call her that behind her back. But her judgments are sound, and I've learned a lot under her, so I do respect her, he explained. Choosing his words carefully. Internally, I smiled wryly. Anyway, we can't present this. Carl concluded, decisively dismissing Mark's suggestion. Oh, come on, we've been pressured to wrap this up by today. Can't we meet your boss directly? I'll explain, Mark asked. Carl shook his head vehemently. That's impossible. She's busy with meetings at another branch today. As Carl paled, Mark clung to hope. Please, just 5 minutes. I chuckled to myself. There's no way you can explain all this in just 5 minutes. Mark bristled at my comment. Don't speak up when you don't know anything. I've explained this product many times before. It seemed I had inadvertently wounded the pride of the top sales performer. Regardless, I handed my business card to Carl. Could you please pass this card to your boss? Carl frowned. But. I took a deep breath. Isn't your boss, Emily? At my words, Carl's eyes widened. How do you know that? Did I mention it? I shook my head. I know her from a long time ago. If my business card does not work, then I'll give up and leave for the day. At my words, Mark shot me a reproachful look. I ignored it and continued to stare at Carl. Hesitantly, Carl stood up. I'll just pass the card. If it doesn't work, you'll leave today, right? After his words, I nodded firmly. Reluctantly, Carl took my business card and left the meeting room. After the door closed, Mark began to rant in a panic. What are you promising on your own? We are told to be done by today. If we can't meet, then just leaving like that. I sighed at Mark's complaints. Either way, they will not need us if we don't do anything. I didn't look at Mark as I replied. I could see from the corner of my eye that Mark was flabbergasted. I'm going to say it was your fault today. I just chuckled at his petulant tone. Then, 10 minutes later, the door opened and a familiar face appeared. Steve. When did you get back to the US? A flushed Emily asked, and I smiled. Today is my first day back at headquarters. Emily was greatly surprised. Really? You came to us on your first day? If you had told me, I would have handled it myself. Carl entered the meeting room delightedly. He seemed bewildered, probably having never seen his boss up close like this. Mark's reaction was predictable, even without looking. He must have his mouth wide open. Sorry to trouble you. May I proceed with explaining the product? Emily nodded slightly but then thoughtfully added, since you're here, it might be a bit of a hassle, but could you explain it to 2 more people? I nodded, not fully understanding. Then, Emily instructed Carl, who left the meeting room again. Shortly after, Carl returned with 2 men. These are Mr. Chen and Mr. Huang from our Chinese branch. Since you're here, could you give the presentation in Chinese? She smiled slightly, gauging my reaction. I feel like I'm being tested, and it excites me. Just what I wanted. Of course. Emily, will you? Emily crossed her arms, her expression turning serious. If these two are convinced, I will be too. If there are parts they aren't satisfied with, we'll need more materials later. With the reunion scene over, she switched to business mode, the Queen of Ice persona perfectly intact, devoid of any smile. While feeling a nostalgic fondness internally, I switched into work mode. I set aside the vast files I had brought and began explaining in detail using the materials Mark had previously used in negotiations. Addressing the two Chinese gentlemen, I answered their questions accurately. I could sense that Mark was genuinely surprised. It felt good, a little. But no, it's not right to mock the young man. However, being skilled at winning people over and having never really faced setbacks due to his top sales performance and excessive confidence, perhaps it wouldn't hurt to bend his pride just a little. In fact, this product was one I handled while in China. Therefore, I knew more about this product than Mark did, having seen the manufacturing process and known the development history. I could provide a more detailed explanation than an average salesperson might. The two Chinese gentlemen were very pleased with my explanation, talking to Emily with satisfaction. Emily discarded her iron mask and smiled. Very impressive. May I ask a question too? Prompted by her, I tightened my loosened focus. She had grilled me over and over again in the past. If I stumbled even slightly, it was back to the drawing board. Reminded of my younger days, I renewed my determination. Her questions were sharp, but I managed to answer all of them smoothly. The contract was settled on the spot, and the negotiation was a great success. I'll be in touch, she said as she left, handing me a business card. On the back, an 11-digit number was hastily scribbled. As we exited Company S, Mark started firing questions like a machine gun. Wait. What's going on? Who are you really? You're not just the new guy who volunteered to carry stuff, right? I chuckled. I'm a guy who spent 8 years honing skills at our China branch and returned today as the head of sales section 1, proficient in Chinese. At my words, Mark's eyes bulged in surprise, and he apologized deeply. To a section head. I'm so sorry. I burst out laughing. You should listen when people talk, you know? Our department head tried to introduce me several times, but you never paid attention. Did you? Mark shrank a bit. I'm sorry. I was busy and flustered. I looked at him seriously. You've gotten by with that attitude so far, but what if I had been a very difficult man? You'd be fired, you know? Mark paled a little. But, you're really lucky. I'm not at all difficult, too bad for you. But it was a close call today, huh? It was good luck that I came along today. Mark glanced at me tentatively. So, Steve, how did you get on Emily's good side? He was surely looking to turn my story into a learning opportunity for his job. Smiling inwardly, I began to share an old story with him as we headed back to the office. 15 years ago. After graduating from university, I started working in sales at this company. I underwent training, shadowed a senior, and when it was time for me to handle things on my own, I was assigned to Company S. At that time, Emily was also newly tasked with handling negotiations with our clients. Being new and extremely vigilant, she would stop my explanations at every turn to ask for details. And if I hesitated in my explanations even slightly, she would order me to take the issue back and revise. She was a tough person. She held herself to the same standards, always impeccably dressed in a crisp shirt and well-tailored suit. Back then, I was an audacious young man trying everything I could to win over this difficult client. But she only smiled when I explained things well. It was almost like she was a teacher, and I found it somewhat frustrating. And then, as things went on, I found myself falling for her. Her occasional smile. Breaking through her iron mask, that smile was incredibly beautiful. I was driven by the desire to see that smile and worked hard to suggest things she would like. Gradually, my performance improved. And then, 8 years ago, I received a transfer order. The location was China. I informed her about the change in my responsibilities, but her expression remained stoic. However, unusually for her, she who had never accepted an invitation for a drink even for business entertaining, asked me out for a drink. As a farewell party. Just the two of us. It was in a small restaurant, and we spent just an hour. No flirty conversations, just good food. Not much talk, but the food was delicious. I was impressed she knew such a good place, though it seemed irrelevant. Her last words to me were, "I hope we meet again." Those words strangely lingered in my heart. As I finished my story, omitting my romantic feelings, Mark's eyes widened in amazement. Wow. I'm not good with that kind of strictness. Redoing work if it's not perfect? That's too much for me. Mark said in a disheartened voice. You need that kind of resolve to get attention from some people. Mark grimaced dramatically and said, I'll leave such people to you, Steve, and I nudged him lightly. I wondered how to toughen up this guy who seemed unlikely to be defeated by a mere dent to his pride. After a tumultuous first day, as I left work, I found myself pondering over something. The business card from Emily turned over. 11 digits. Definitely a cell phone number. Probably Emily's private number. Should I call it? Not calling might be impolite after she gave it to me. Various thoughts crossed my mind, but I decided to be honest with my desires. I wanted to see her. That reason was enough. I dialed the number with a pounding heart, and it connected even before it rang once. Just that made me incredibly happy. Hello? Her voice came through tentatively. Right, she wouldn't know my number. Ah, it's Steve. As I spoke, Emily's tone relaxed a bit. Ah, I thought so. Thank you for calling. A brief silence followed. I'm at the small restaurant right now, remember this place? Before you went to China. Before Emily could finish, I interrupted, I remember. Good memory. I thought you might be busy today. I cut her off again. I'm free. Can I come over now? A chuckle came through the phone. It's frustrating not being able to see her expression. The smile of the woman I liked is on the other side of the phone. I'll be waiting. The moment I hung up, I started running. When I arrived at the small restaurant, panting, Emily chuckled. There was no need to rush. I wasn't going anywhere. Seeing her smile that I had missed earlier, I mentally celebrated. I sat down opposite her, my heart pounding. To celebrate your return to headquarters, let me treat you. What would you like to drink? Her left hand, extending the menu, was beautiful. There was no ring on her left ring finger. Her last name hadn't changed. Maybe she doesn't wear rings. Or maybe she keeps her maiden name for work, or perhaps she's married but has a different last name. As I considered all the possibilities, I couldn't bring myself to ask the one question. Are you married? Then, she asked me, are you married? I was taken aback for a moment when the words came from Emily instead. It took me a moment to realize that the question I had been hesitant to ask had been posed by her. She waited for my answer for a bit, then sighed. So, you are married. It's your policy not to wear a ring? I panicked, not expecting her to conclude her own question. I'm not married. Not at all. I was also wondering whether I should ask you that, and was surprised. As I fumbled for words, her expression turned sad. Who would marry a woman called the Ice Queen behind her back? Her self-deprecating words made my heart skip a beat. I would like to, if I could. Upon hearing this, she looked surprised and then laughed. You've always been such a charmer. It was the biggest smile I had seen from her yet. Frustrated that she might think I was joking, I faced her earnestly. I'm not lying. At my words, she suddenly teared up. Ah. I'm sorry. Did I say something to make you cry? Startled by her tears, she was also taken aback. Ah. Tears? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. She wiped her tears with her index finger and looked down. I'm sorry. It's just, lately at home from my mother. Recently, her sister had her third child, and their mother had told her, you'll have to manage your old age on your own. It felt as if she was being told she couldn't hope for children or marriage of her own and should live her life alone. Those words had stuck with her since. I was just a bit troubled, and then you said something unexpected, it shook me. Saying this, she smiled and sipped her whiskey, looking beautiful. Why would you say something so unexpected? I've always liked you, Emily. I decided to be forthright. Ignoring her puzzled look, I continued. Working with you, at first I was always messing up, and you patiently suggested improvements. When things came together, you smiled at me. That smile was beautiful. I poured out all my feelings. Even today, in the meeting room, seeing you who usually doesn't smile like that, smiling so much because of our reunion, and earlier, when I ran all the way here and you smiled. I want to see more of your smiles. I want to see the expressions you show only to me. Even while I was in China. I couldn't forget you. She was flustered. Wait. That's embarrassing. Are you joking? She questioned if all I had said was a lie. Disbelieving, I exclaimed quietly. It's not a lie. Emily. At this, her face turned bright red. If you've given up on marriage, please marry me. Even if it's just as partners for our later years, please stay by my side. I'll spend the rest of my life making you fall for me. Her lips trembled. But I'm already 39 years old, and children. Steve, you should marry a younger woman, not someone like me. It was painful to hear her say that. I gently wiped the tears welling up in her eyes with my index finger. Startled by my touch, she flinched. I want to be with you, not with some younger woman, but with you. I said it quietly, looking into her eyes. When I was about to go to China, you said, it would be nice to meet again. When we met again. I was determined to confess to you, of course. Only if you weren't married. Her eyes widened. Wait, you mean, since that time? I nodded. I've been telling you, I've always liked you even before then. She pouted. Then why didn't you say anything before you went to China? I was stunned. Because it seemed like there was no chance. I thought you wouldn't see me as a romantic prospect. When I said this, she puffed her cheeks. It's not true, back then. I liked you. I almost shouted out loud but stopped myself. It's not good to yell in a small restaurant. What? As I was speechless, she looked down. Why would a woman go to dinner alone with a guy who she does not like? Normally. Hearing this, I held my head. Right, she was that kind of woman. Even if it was just a farewell party, her invitation indicated that there was a chance. I love you so much. The words naturally came out, and she blushed deeply. I'm sorry for being so dense. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Is it still okay if we start now? She nodded slightly. Truly, she had no confidence in being loved. If that's the case, I'll make her feel loved as much as possible from now on. That she is deeply loved. For a lifetime. 2 years have passed since then. Robert is crying. Emily's shout made me hurry over. Wait. If Robert is crying, look. Hannah started crying too. We are married and currently on parental leave, raising our twins. After getting married and considering our ages, we quickly sought fertility treatments and were blessed with twins, a boy and a girl. At 41, having twins was a concern, but the Queen of Ice bravely went through her pregnancy, worked hard until her maternity leave, and successfully gave birth to twins. She was divine after giving birth. Thank you for everything, I love you. When I expressed my gratitude, Emily let tears fall. I wonder if I deserve to be this happy. I'll never forget the moment she said that with tearful eyes. Today, Mark is coming over to celebrate the birth. I want kids soon too, says Mark, who doesn't even have a partner yet. I wonder how he'll react to the realities of parenting. How much will it deflate his pride? I'm a bit maliciously looking forward to it. As we soothe our little twins, I wonder if it's bad for their education to harbor such feelings. I hope these kids grow up straight and true, bathed in our love. Emily and I smiled at each other as we soothed our children together. Hey! What are you going to do about this? I hurried toward the sound of the voice. When I got there, I saw an angry woman and my confused younger brother, Sean. In Sean's hand was a mop, while the woman's suit shoulder was wet and stained. Seeing this woman dressed in an obviously expensive and classy suit, my spine chilled. It turned out this woman was Michelle, the president's daughter. What happened? I got dirty from the mop. I did say I was passing by. Michelle was speaking so fervently that Sean was completely petrified by her intensity. I quickly apologized. Michelle, I sincerely apologize. This is my brother, Sean. He has a hearing disability, and I think he didn't hear you. Sean. Michelle said this and then bowed her head. I'll pay for the cleaning. As I reached for my wallet, a tear fell from Michelle's eyes as she looked up. Her tear made both Sean and I flustered. Sean also desperately tried to say something. You don't need to pay for the cleaning, she said, wiped her tears, and ran off. A few hours later, we were called into the president's office. My name is Kyle. After graduating from college, I have been working at an IT company for 5 years, now at the age of 27. I have a younger brother, 4 years my junior. His name is Sean. He started working as a janitor at our company twice a week this September. Sean, the HR department called. Noticing that he didn't react to my voice at all, I tapped him on the shoulder. As he slowly turned around, I spoke near his ear. HR called for you. They said it's a good time to come down, I told him near his ear. Thank you. Sean put down his cleaning supplies and went downstairs. He seems more alive here than at home. I watched his back with relief as he left. Sean was involved in a car accident in the summer of his senior year of high school. He broke both legs, but they healed completely with rehabilitation. However, his hearing loss was permanent. Sean's hearing is such that he can barely hear if someone speaks right next to his ear. Whether this is considered lucky or not varies by person, but at least our whole family was quite shocked. Why did it have to be Sean? I'd take his place if I could, our parents especially took it hard. Trying to cheer up our parents, or perhaps out of his natural disposition, he always acted cheerfully. It's gotten hard to hear, but I can hear, so it's okay. It will make things like getting a job harder, but I'll manage. Blessed with supportive friends and teachers, Sean successfully graduated high school. But he didn't go on to college. Just give me some time. I'll figure out what I can do. So after graduating high school, he spent some time learning sign language and drawing, his favorite hobby. He seemed to be pondering, but he never consulted his family about it. So we quietly watched as he figured out his future. A year later, it seemed Sean had finally found his path. I'm going to be an illustrator. There are people who like my drawings. It seems that Sean had been regularly uploading pictures he drew as a hobby online. People who liked his drawings appeared, and he began receiving requests for illustrations. Since we communicate mostly via email, I think I can manage just fine despite my hearing loss, he said. He seemed really happy to be accepted with his condition. Just give it your best shot. I'm also good with computers, so don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. I told him as I worked at an IT company. Sean gave me a big smile in response. Since then, he has been doing various freelance jobs as an illustrator, like advertisements and company logo design. While he wasn't making enough to live on his own, it was sufficient to live comfortably at home with our parents. However, one day, Sean emailed me. Kyle, do you know of any work I might be able to do? Did you get tired of drawing? No. I plan to continue as an illustrator. But, I want a stable income. All of Sean's friends had gone to college after high school. Sean worked as an illustrator while his friends went to college. Until last year, his student friends respected him as a self-employed individual, and Sean felt good about their relationships. However, recently, when he met with his friends who had just started working, they discussed their first salaries. Sean didn't disclose his earnings, but he realized that his monthly income was significantly lower than his friends who were new to the workforce. Since his illustration work is one-shot, his income varies each month, and the best he does is about $1,200 a month. It can't be helped. Being an employee working at a company is totally different from being self-employed. I always respect you, Sean. For working hard at something you love, I said. It was clear Sean struggled due to his hearing loss. However, I deliberately didn't mention his disability. If I'm only earning this much after a few years, I guess that's the limit of my talents. I feel bad having to rely on our parents. Everyone gave their parents gifts with their first paycheck. I also want to earn enough to make our parents feel secure and to give them something nice, he said. So, he was looking for a job that could provide a stable income in addition to his illustration work. Sean's feelings came through loud and clear. And then it clicked. There is a job as a janitor available. I had recently heard from a colleague that our company was hiring janitors under the Disability Employment Scheme. The position is open for the disabled. Are you okay with that? When I hesitated slightly, Sean laughed. I've long accepted my disability. Plus, being under that scheme means people will be aware of my condition up front, which makes things easier for me. Sean's nonchalant response put me at ease. I immediately went to talk to the HR department, and Sean's employment was swiftly arranged. Now, it has been 6 months since he started working at our company. Apart from his hearing difficulties, Sean is no different from the rest of us. His meticulousness has made a positive impact, and his work has been well received. Also, since my colleagues treat Sean kindly, he enjoys his work and looks lively. One day, as I was returning from a meeting room, I heard a woman's shrill voice. Hey! What are you going to do about this? I rushed toward the sound of the voice. When I arrived, I saw an angry woman and a confused-looking Sean. Sean was holding a mop, while the woman's suit shoulder was wet and stained. Seeing the woman in such an expensive and classy suit made me freeze. It turned out to be Michelle, the president's daughter. What happened? This person dirted it with the mop. I did say I was passing behind. Startled by Michelle's forceful manner, Sean was completely frozen. It was so unlike the usually quiet Michelle to be this upset. I hurriedly apologized. Michelle, I'm terribly sorry. This is my brother Sean. He has a hearing disability and probably didn't hear you, I explained. Sean. Yes, I'm Kyle from the systems department. I'll definitely cover the cleaning costs, so please forgive this issue. How long has Sean had hearing difficulties? About 5 years now. How long has he been working here? He started about 6 months ago. Did he have any other jobs before this? He's still working from home as an illustrator. Here, he works twice a week under a contract. I answered on behalf of Sean, who couldn't quite grasp Michelle's rapid speech. So drawing is his main profession. Michelle said this and then looked down. But he's also really dedicated to his job here. I couldn't help but wonder if she thought he wasn't serious about his job here because it wasn't his main profession. I felt compelled to defend Sean's honor. Michelle, I am truly sorry. I'm going to pay the cleaning cost. As I said this and started to pull out my wallet, a tear rolled down Michelle's face as she looked up. Her tears panicked both Sean and me. Sean also tried desperately to convey something. You don't need to pay for the cleaning, she said, wiped her tears, and then ran off. Kyle, what did she say? Sean, who couldn't catch the conversation, looked worried. I moved closer and spoke slowly into his ear. She said she doesn't need the cleaning money. She was also concerned about how long you've been working here. Do you think she'll report my mistake? Sean looked worried. Unable to say anything, I could only look down. Actually, she's the president's daughter. What? Sean was at a loss for words. I think she's still a college student, but she comes here occasionally for some business with Mr. Sanders. She's usually reserved but always polite. And she's well regarded. I was also surprised to see her so emotionally exposed. Hearing this, Sean held his head. I'll make sure to pay the cleaning costs. It's a mistake anyone could make, so don't worry about it. Just be more careful next time. I was also nervous about how Michelle would respond, but I tried to cheer up a brooding Sean. Due to another appointment, I had to leave Sean there. Soon after, an email from Mr. Sanders came to me. Kyle, please come to the president's office at 2 p.m. with your brother. That was all it said. But I immediately knew it was about the earlier incident, and I couldn't help but tremble. Michelle must have told her father. But since it was entirely Sean's fault, there was nothing to be done. Sean had just started gaining confidence in working outside. I just hoped he wouldn't get fired. In the morning, Sean meticulously groomed himself and headed to work with enthusiasm. He communicated happily with my colleagues. Having avoided social interactions due to his hearing loss, he had grown remarkably in these past few months. I absolutely wanted to avoid him losing his newfound confidence. Kyle, sorry. It's my fault that you got called in too. As I headed to the lobby where I was meeting Sean, he sat there looking nervous. It's okay. We're just going to have a talk. I tried to hide my own anxiety and encouraged him as we headed to the president's office. Excuse me, this is Kyle. Who came out was Mr. Sanders himself. Sorry to call you like this. Please, come in, he said with a kind smile, which took both Sean and me by surprise. Nice to meet you, I'm John Sanders. The president greeted Sean slowly, using both sign language and voice. Ah, nice to meet you. I'm Sean. Surprised, Sean also greeted Mr. Sanders, following his lead. Mr. Sanders, you know sign language. I couldn't hide my surprise, and Mr. Sanders showed a slightly sad expression. Well, just a little. I haven't used it for a while, so I've forgotten quite a bit, he said as he ushered us into the room. I wondered what he meant by not having used it for a while. As I followed Mr. Sanders into the room, there stood Michelle. She was wearing different clothes from the suit she had on earlier. Michelle, we are sorry for. I'm the one who should apologize. It was a precious suit my mother bought for me, and I lost my composure. Before we could apologize, Michelle apologized first. Sean, I'm really sorry for shouting at you suddenly. I'm ashamed to admit that I had a prejudice that everyone in the company has no disabilities. Michelle, like Mr. Sanders, turned to Sean and communicated in both sign language and voice. Michelle can also use sign language. I felt relieved, believing these two would truly understand Sean. No, it was entirely my fault earlier. I'll be more careful, so please give me another chance. Sean deeply apologized. Then, Michelle took out a large framed picture from her bag. Sean, did you draw this? When she turned the frame around, it revealed a painting of Michelle in a uniform, smiling closely with another woman. The artwork was done in a gentle touch, surrounded by colorful flowers. The gentle touch of the drawing conveyed their happiness. Sean was taken aback. From that time? Yes. 4 years ago, we met at Potomac Park. My mother couldn't go out after that day, but this drawing brightened up her hospital room. She looked at it happily every day, Michelle said with tears in her voice. Noticing I was lost, Mr. Sanders explained in both sign language and voice. Mr. Sanders' wife, Elizabeth, was diagnosed with tongue cancer 7 years ago and had her entire tongue surgically removed. Upon hearing that the cancer required the complete removal of her tongue, both Mr. Sanders and Michelle were deeply shocked. But Elizabeth herself was different. I have plenty of time, and I'll learn sign language. I want to have lots of fun conversations with you. Elizabeth, always cheerful, gave them strength to face forward. To understand my wife's sign language, both Michelle and I learned desperately. Being busy learning sign language helped us avoid worrying about the inevitable. I think that was probably my wife's intention. I followed his gaze to a photo of the 3 family members displayed in the room. We had some peaceful years, but 5 years ago, the cancer metastasized. From there, Elizabeth's condition rapidly worsened, and she had been hospitalized ever since. Continuing in both sign language and voice, Michelle said. In the spring, my mother had some good days, so she got permission to go out if it was near the hospital. Michelle took her flower-loving mother Elizabeth in a wheelchair for a walk to Potomac Park near the hospital. That's where we met Sean, who was painting there. Michelle smiled gently at Sean. According to Michelle, Elizabeth, sitting on a bench, showed interest in Sean, who was drawing flowers, and approached him using sign language. I thought he would ignore her for sure, but to our surprise, Sean responded in sign language. Sean shyly smiled. I was feeling pretty desperate back then. Everyone around me seemed to be enjoying college and looking forward to a bright future. I, being hard of hearing, wondered what was in store for me. I couldn't talk to anyone, felt uncomfortable at home, and just killed time alone in the park. So when someone approached me with a smile and started talking in sign language, I was simply overjoyed. It's hard to believe that Sean, who always tried to act cheerful in front of us, felt this way. It made my heart ache. Michelle continued to look at Sean with a kind gaze. When you responded in sign language, my mom was really happy. As we talked, you started to draw a picture of us. During their walk in the park, Sean quickly sketched a picture of the two of them. It was because your relationship seemed so wonderful. Sean realized that Elizabeth was in a much more serious condition than himself. But seeing Elizabeth living her life to the fullest, happily smiling next to Michelle, gave him a sense of salvation. When we were leaving, you gave us this picture. Both my mom and I were moved. Every time I look at this picture, I can recall those happy moments. Michelle said. Elizabeth passed away 2 weeks later. Thanks to your drawing, my mother was able to spend her time in the hospital room calmly and happily. Michelle looked at the painting with a nostalgic and cheerful expression. By the way, how did you know my name? Sean asked. When they first met in the park, they had asked for his name, but he was too embarrassed to tell them. Michelle replied apologetically. Actually, I saw your name written on your bicycle when we were saying goodbye. Ah, I see. Sean said with a bashful smile. It was just a hobby sketch, and back then, I lacked the courage to introduce myself. I even wished I could be someone else. But now, hearing your story, I've started to like myself a little more. Sean said, smiling at Michelle. Did you wear a suit today to go somewhere? I asked. Earlier, she had mentioned it was an important suit that she got from her mother. Yes, actually, I had a job interview. Oh. How did the interview go? It wasn't before the interview, was it? I anxiously awaited Michelle's reply. Michelle laughed and said, the interview didn't go well. It was with my top choice publishing house, but they kept asking about my father. Mr. Sanders shrugged apologetically. Michelle loves to write and dreams of publishing her own book someday. She was aiming for a publishing house, but the company she interviewed with today hardly let her speak properly. How long do you plan to work before quitting? This is not a suitable place for the boss's daughter. Even though it's a different industry. We don't want to be targeted by your father. It seemed no one really listened to Michelle's feelings. I came here to complain that I didn't choose to be born as the daughter of a president, she said. And just as she was heading to the president's office, she was inadvertently dirted by Sean with a mop. If you hadn't stopped me with that mop, I would have said something terrible to my father, she said. Thanks to the mop, her anger towards her father disappeared, and knowing Sean's true identity brought back precious memories with her mother. It's truly a strange twist of fate. It must have been my mother, wanting me to meet you so that I could pursue what I love. Both Sean and I looked at each other, confused by what Michelle meant. What do you mean? I asked. Michelle looked straight at Sean and said, Sean, would you like to work with me? Surprised by Michelle's sudden proposal, his eyes widened. Sean, you're still doing illustration work, right? When Michelle asked him a question, Sean turned to look at me. I mentioned it earlier when she asked. Sean faced Michelle again and nodded shyly. Would you be interested in becoming a children's book author? I've already written a few stories for children's books. But I'm not quite satisfied with the illustrations I do myself. Michelle quickly took out her laptop and showed him the incomplete manuscript of her book, with spaces left blank for illustrations. It seems the picture book Michelle wants to create is intended for adults, featuring more text than usual. She wants to create a picture book that can be read in about 15 minutes and leaves the reader feeling warm inside. Didn't your parents read you a bedtime story when you were little? I loved that time. It helped me end my day on a happy note, she explained. Michelle thought it would be wonderful if adults could also end their days by escaping into the world of a picture book. Hearing Michelle's thoughts warmed my heart. Sean, why don't you give it a try? I encouraged him. Sean remained silent for a while as he stared at the laptop screen, but eventually, he looked up and said, Your writing is wonderful. I'm not sure if my drawings will match your words, but I'd like to try. Hearing Sean's response, her face lit up. Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with you, she said enthusiastically. The two of them shook hands firmly. Watching this, I caught Mr. Sanders' eye, and we both squinted in approval. He will be fine. My wife also said so. Mr. Sanders whispered to me. What did your wife say? Ah. I'll tell you about it some other time. Mr. Sanders' words piqued my curiosity, but it seems he isn't ready to share more at this moment. Putting that aside, I hoped that their picture book would come together successfully. After that, Sean began to go to meetings with Michelle frequently. Going to a meeting now? Yeah. It's more efficient to draw while getting feedback, he replied. It was already dark outside. I'll drive you there. Make sure to call me when you're heading back. I'll come pick you up, I insisted. The darkness posed risks, especially for Sean, who was hard of hearing. Seeing my concern, Sean gave a wry smile but gratefully said, "Thank you." During the drive, Sean happily shared how Michelle's writing touched his heart and how her words naturally inspired his illustrations. Occasionally, Michelle would also share trivial stories about her interactions with her father, Mr. Sanders. Working with Michelle, I realized that Sean was discovering new aspects of himself. I might be back late, so I'll go home on my own, Sean said, considering my schedule. That's fine. I have plenty of things to do myself. Seeing you work hard motivates me too, I reassured him. Hearing this, Sean smiled happily. Thank you. I'll get in touch later, he said, stepping out of the car with a bounce in his step. Seeing Sean's excited demeanor made me genuinely happy. Knowing the hardships he once hid from us, I now wanted nothing more than for Sean to find true happiness and planned to support him wholeheartedly. Of course, he continued his job as a janitor as usual. The lights in his room stayed on late into the night, and sometimes he would stumble out in the mornings, bleary-eyed. But our parents simply watched over him without comment. 3 months later, their first book was completed. The protagonist of the book was Michelle's mother, Elizabeth. Despite being diagnosed with cancer, Elizabeth never gave up on life and remained as bright as the sun. If my family cries because of me, I'll make them laugh that much harder. Speak what you want to do today, and make it happen. This is the story of Elizabeth's way of life. Michelle told me that it's a piece of fiction very close to nonfiction. In the story, Elizabeth meets a young man after being given a month to live. A young man with despair in his eyes, even though he had no terminal diagnosis. When she spoke to him in sign language, he responded in kind. A secret conversation that no one else could understand, just between the two of them. Elizabeth opened up to the young man about her fear of death for the first time. I always want my loved ones to be smiling, so I make it a point to smile every day. But I wonder how sad my family will be when I'm gone. When they are grieving, I won't be able to be by their side anymore. That's what scares me. Is there a way to keep everyone happy? The young man thought for a moment, then opened his sketchbook. He drew fervently, immersed in his art. Seeing his serious profile, Elizabeth smiled. She thought, I want this person to live life for myself. As a gentle ray of sunlight beckoned sleep, the young man stopped his hand. He hesitated slightly but then showed her the sketchbook. Wow, it's beautiful. There, Elizabeth was depicted with a gentle smile. She was surrounded by flowers, looking very happy. Thank you for drawing me so beautifully. When my family sees this, they will surely smile. And from above, I can feel happy watching them. Elizabeth expressed her gratitude. The young man blushed shyly. Elizabeth stood in front of him. Really, thank you so much, she said, and handed him a bookmark made from a pressed cherry blossom petal. I'd be happy if you could keep this in my stead. And every spring, look up at the cherry trees for me. I'm sure you'll feel how wonderful it is to be alive, she told him. The young man silently accepted the bookmark. Elizabeth walked away with a bright smile. The young man watched her figure disappear into the distance. Since that day, he often returned to the place where they had met, but he never saw her again. Because Elizabeth had already departed for the skies. When spring came, the young man noticed the bookmark Elizabeth had given him. Prompted by a gentle breeze, he went to the place where they had met. It was a path lined with cherry trees, and cherry blossoms fluttered in the air. The young man looked up at the cherry tree and took a deep breath. A father and daughter, it seemed, approached from the other direction. The daughter held a picture frame carefully. Mom, the cherry blossoms are dancing, she said. We got to see them as a family of 3 this year, the father replied. The daughter raised the picture frame high. The young man gasped. In the frame was undoubtedly the portrait of Elizabeth he had drawn. As the two passed by, the young man murmured as he watched them go, "I will live to the fullest." My face was a mess of tears after reading the picture book. How was it? It's wonderful. I'm sure Elizabeth would be very pleased. Michelle replied with a smile. Sean's illustrations complemented Michelle's writing beautifully, resulting in a warm and beautiful picture book. What moved me the most was that the portrait of Elizabeth in the book was exactly the one Sean had genuinely gifted. "This is a picture book that only you could have created," I told him. Sean blushed and nodded. Months later, the picture book was successfully published and became a small talk of the town. Now, feeling fulfilled, Michelle and Sean were already working on their next project. Sean, who used to be hindered by his disability, was no longer that person. He was thoroughly enjoying each day. One day, during lunch break, I happened to meet Mr. Sanders outside and asked him, "By the way, Mr. Sanders, what did your wife say?" I had been curious about his comment when Michelle invited Sean to create the picture book, saying, "He will be fine." My wife also said so. My wife said that Michelle's writing and Sean's drawings share the same warmth. She must have known that they would end up like this. Now, she's surely watching them from above and is very happy. Mr. Sanders replied, squinting up at the sky. I followed his gaze upwards. From somewhere, a cherry blossom petal fluttered down gently.